There was a quiet truth that everyone in Hollywood thought they understood about Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. They were friends, they were kind, they were respectful toward each other, and they had shared a beautiful journey during their movies together. But the deeper story, the one that no one ever spoke about, lived in small memories that both of them carried silently. Those memories waited for years untouched because life had pulled them in different directions. No one expected those quiet threads to return. No one believed those threads still had the strength to pull them back toward each other after so much time. Yet life had a way of bending when hearts refused to forget. Keanu had spent many years learning how to move forward through loss, through pain, and through the weight of expectations he never wanted. He lived his life softly, avoiding loud attention, choosing stillness instead of noise. Sandra had built her own life around resilience and careful hope. She learned how to protect her heart even when the world asked her to keep giving it away. She raised her children with gratitude and fought to create a balance that felt honest. Both lived as if the world could not pull them back together again, but something unseen prepared a path neither of them knew they were walking toward. The story began quietly, far from cameras, far from interviews, far from rumors. It started in a calm evening when Keanu sat alone on his balcony while the city beneath him glowed with its usual restless lights. He looked down at a letter he had kept for years. It was folded neatly, the edges softened from time. It was not written by Sandra, yet it carried her presence because it came from a moment they once shared. The letter reminded him of a promise he never fulfilled, not because he refused, but because life had placed too many storms between that promise and the man he eventually became. He breathed slowly as he opened the paper again. He read the lines that felt like a gentle echo from a different life. He felt something shift inside him. It was a calling, a pull, a reminder that he had left something unfinished. For years he told himself it did not matter, that the story between him and Sandra had ended naturally, beautifully, and completely. But now his heart disagreed. Something inside him whispered that their silence had lasted long enough. Across the city, Sandra prepared dinner for her children. She moved through her kitchen with gentle purpose. She spoke to them with warmth, making sure they tasted not only the meal but also the comfort she tried to build around them every day. When they left the table, she remained seated for a quiet moment. Her eyes drifted toward the window, where the last orange light of sunset softened everything it touched. She felt something shift too, as if her heart recognized a familiar memory. She pressed her hand to her chest without understanding why. It felt like a message she had not yet heard, but somehow already recognized. What neither of them knew was that fate was moving quietly, arranging moments that would collide in ways they could not predict. The next morning began like any other. Sandra woke early, preparing for a charity event she had agreed to attend weeks earlier. She did not want a crowded room or flashing cameras, but the event supported children who needed help, and she could never turn away from that. She dressed simply, choosing soft colors and comfortable fabric. She tied her hair back and stepped into a version of herself that felt grounded and purposeful. Keanu also woke early. He had agreed to visit a friend at an art studio that morning. He felt unusually restless, almost as if the world wanted him to be somewhere else. He could not explain the feeling, but he followed it because he trusted his intuition more than his plans. Instead of going directly to the studio, he decided to take a long walk first. It was a quiet decision, one that would change everything that day. The event Sandra attended was held inside a simple community hall decorated with drawings made by children. Colorful paper flowers hung from the walls. There were small tables filled with crayons and paints. Sandra smiled as she walked in because these things always made her feel grounded. She moved from table to table, talking softly to the children, encouraging them to draw whatever made them feel brave. She stayed close to the moment, unaware that the world outside had begun shifting towards something she could not avoid. Keanu walked along the street near the same neighborhood. The morning air felt gentle, the sunlight warm but not harsh. He kept his head low and wore a plain jacket that made him blend with the crowd. He walked without direction until he heard a sound that made him pause. It was a laugh, not just any laugh, but a laugh he recognized even after so many years. It was soft, warm, and carried the same musical tone he remembered from long ago. He stopped completely, frozen by the sound. He turned slowly toward the community hall. The door was open. Inside, he could see children gathered around a woman whose smile softened the entire room. The sunlight behind her made her silhouette glow. Keanu felt something powerful move through him. His breath caught as he recognized the familiar shape of her shoulders, the gentle way she leaned down to speak to a child, the grace in her movement. He had not seen Sandra in years, not in person, not in a space this quiet, this unguarded. He stood at the door without stepping inside. He felt a wave of emotions rise in him. Regret, gratitude, longing, and something deeper that he could not name. He watched her for a long moment, trying to understand why this moment felt different from all the other memories he carried. Finally, he whispered to himself, almost silently, as if afraid the world would hear him before he was ready. She looks the same. But it was not true. She looked stronger. She looked softer. She looked like someone who had walked through storms and still chosen kindness every single time. She looked like someone who had healed the broken parts of her life without expecting applause. Keanu felt humbled as he watched her, realizing how much time had passed and how much he had missed by staying away. Sandra did not notice him at first. She continued speaking to a child who proudly held up a painting. She complimented it with genuine excitement, and the child smiled brightly. Then, as she stood and turned to reach for another paper, her eyes drifted toward the open door. She froze. Her breath stopped. Keanu stood in the doorway, half hidden by the sunlight behind him. Their eyes met. The years between them collapsed instantly. The world around them fell silent, even though the room was filled with noise. Sandra felt her heart race so quickly she had to steady her breath. She knew this was not a dream. She knew this moment was real, and she knew she was not prepared. Keanu stepped inside, hesitant but sincere. Sandra stared at him with wide eyes, her heart heavy with memories she had tried to bury gently, without bitterness. She took a small step toward him, then stopped because she realized she had no idea what she wanted to say first. He offered a small smile. It was the same smile she remembered from decades earlier. Gentle, humble, filled with silent emotion. She felt her throat tighten. "Hi, Sandra," he said softly. She breathed out slowly, steadying herself. "Hi, Keanu." It was the simplest exchange, yet it carried years of unspoken stories. The children immediately noticed the tall man who stepped inside. Some recognized his face from posters and movies their parents loved. One child tugged Sandra's sleeve and whispered, "Is that him?" with wide, curious eyes. Sandra let out a quiet laugh, both amused and shaken, and nodded. Keanu kneeled down to greet the child, showing the same kindness he showed in every part of his life. Sandra watched him silently. Every movement reminded her of who he was at his core. Gentle, humble, thoughtful, she felt something inside her shift again. She wondered why life had brought him back now after so many years of silence. When the event ended, Sandra stepped outside into the sunlight. She expected Keanu to leave quietly as he always did. Instead, he waited near the entrance, hands in his pockets, looking at the ground. When he looked up, their eyes met again, and something unspoken passed between them. "I owe you an explanation," Keanu said softly. Sandra felt her chest tighten. "About what?" He hesitated. "About why I stayed away." She looked at him for a long moment. Her emotions blended with confusion, sadness, and relief. "Keanu, you don't owe me anything." He shook his head slowly. "I think I do." She swallowed. "Why did you come today?" He looked away, breathing deeply, "Because something told me it was time." Sandra did not know what that meant. She did not know whether he returned because of guilt, memory, longing, or destiny. She only knew that their reunion was not an accident. Keanu stepped closer. "There is something you should know." "Keanu," she whispered nervously, "what happened?" He opened his mouth, preparing to speak. But before the words came out, before he could tell her the truth he had carried for years, a voice behind them called out loudly, "Keanu Reeves, I have been looking for you everywhere." They both turned sharply. A figure stepped toward them, and Sandra froze as she realized this person knew something she did not. The moment became heavy, charged with suspense. Keanu's expression changed completely. Whatever he came to tell her, whatever truth he had held for years, was suddenly connected to the person now approaching them. The air thickened. Sandra whispered quietly, almost afraid of the answer. "Keanu, who is that?" He looked at her with eyes filled with silent weight. "Someone who is going to change everything." And the screen fades here. The moment the stranger approached, Sandra felt something shift inside her like a fragile thread pulled suddenly. She watched Keanu's expression tighten in a way she had never seen before. He looked almost vulnerable, almost worried, and this alone made her heart beat faster because she had always known Keanu as calm, steady, and collected. Whatever this person represented, it was not something simple. It was not something casual. It was something that held weight, something that lived in the quiet space between Keanu's past and their present reunion. The stranger walked toward them with a determined pace. He was a middle-aged man with sharp eyes that moved like they were used to observing people. His clothes were simple but well kept, and his presence felt strangely familiar in a way Sandra could not yet place. Keanu inhaled deeply and stepped forward slightly, as if trying to protect Sandra from something he could not yet explain. Sandra noticed the protective instinct and felt a warmth mixed with confusion. The man stopped in front of them and spoke with a tone that carried both urgency and restraint. "Keanu, I told you we needed to speak privately. This is important." Keanu's jaw tightened. "I know, but this is not the time." The man shook his head. The time chose itself. Sandra watched the two of them with growing tension. She finally gathered the courage to step closer. "Keanu, what is going on? You said you owed me an explanation about why you stayed away. Does this have something to do with that?" Keanu looked at her with eyes full of hesitation. "Yes, it does." The man looked at Sandra as if evaluating something about her. Then he spoke with a softer tone. "Miss Bullock, I am sorry that you are meeting me this way. My name is Daniel. I am here because something happened years ago that you were never told." Sandra's breath caught. The words "you were never told" struck her like cold water. She immediately looked at Keanu, searching his eyes for an answer he still refused to express. Keanu exhaled slowly. "Sandra, we should sit." She felt a wave of fear rise in her chest. "Keanu, just tell me, what is this about?" He looked pained. "It is about why I left, why I disappeared when you needed support, why I did not come back sooner." Her voice dropped softly. "I always thought you just moved on." Keanu shook his head. "I never moved on from the truth of that moment, but I did move away from you because I thought I was protecting you." Sandra felt her heart twist painfully. "Protecting me from what?" Before he could answer, Daniel stepped in again. "Might I suggest we find somewhere quiet? This is not a conversation for the street." Keanu agreed, and Sandra nodded reluctantly. The three of them walked to a small, empty park nearby, shaded by tall trees and softened by the sound of distant traffic. They sat on a wooden bench that felt too still for the tension between them. Sandra sat between them, her hands clasped together in her lap, her heartbeat loud in her ears. Keanu sat on her right, Daniel on her left. She looked at both of them, waiting for the truth to finally unfold. Daniel spoke first. "Miss Bullock, I worked in security coordination at the studio years ago. I handled background checks, schedules, and protection arrangements for certain actors, including Keanu. During that time, something happened that we kept quiet because we believed revealing it would cause unnecessary fear." Keanu dropped his gaze. Sandra stared at Daniel with growing confusion and anxiety. "What happened?" Daniel continued. "During the filming period when you and Keanu grew close, there was someone watching you. Not a fan, not a reporter, someone with unstable intentions. We received letters and messages that mentioned both of you. They became more frequent, more detailed, and more concerning." Sandra felt her mouth go dry. "Letters concerning how?" Keanu finally lifted his head. "They mentioned things about your daily life that only someone following you closely could know." Sandra's heart pounded. "So I was being watched?" "Yes," Daniel said. "And so was Keanu, but the messages directed at Keanu were different. They warned him to stay away from you." Sandra felt a cold shock hit her. She looked at Keanu with disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't either of you tell me?" Keanu's voice was soft, almost breaking. "Because we thought we were protecting you. We thought the attention would die down if I stepped back." Sandra shook her head slowly, overwhelmed. "You left because of a threat." Keanu nodded. "I left because someone made it clear that my presence might put you in danger, and I knew how much you were already dealing with in your life. I thought disappearing was the only way to keep you safe." Sandra felt tears gather in her eyes, not from pain, but from the weight of understanding she had never expected. All these years, she believed he left because their connection did not matter to him. She believed he had simply chosen silence. But now she understood that his silence was made of fear and sacrifice, not rejection. Daniel continued. "For a while, we monitored the situation. Then it escalated. There was an incident that we handled quietly. We advised Keanu to step away completely. It was the only way to calm things down." Sandra pressed her fingers to her forehead. "What kind of incident?" Keanu answered quietly. Someone tried to follow you from the studio. Daniel and his team intercepted them before anything happened. We kept it from you because you were under immense pressure at the time, and we did not want to add more." Sandra looked stunned. She had no idea that any of this had happened. It felt unreal, like learning a hidden piece of her own history years after it mattered. She stared at Keanu with new eyes. "You walked away to protect me," she whispered. Keanu held her gaze. "I walked away because I cared, and because I was afraid of what might happen if I stayed." Sandra's throat tightened, her voice trembled. "Keanu, I spent years thinking I was just someone you left behind." He shook his head quickly. "You were never someone I could leave behind. You were someone I never stopped thinking about." Sandra blinked through the weight of his confession. The truth settled inside her like a warm ache. She had spent years building walls around a part of her past that she never fully understood. Now those walls were cracking, and behind them lived memories she had locked away too early. Daniel leaned back slightly, giving them space. "There is something else you should know," he added. "The person who caused all of this resurfaced recently. That is why I came to find Keanu. The situation changed." Keanu turned sharply. "What do you mean resurfaced?" Daniel took a breath. He reached out again, the same handwriting, the same style, similar threats, only this time his message was different. Sandra felt a cold wave pass through her body. "Different how?" Daniel looked directly at her. "This time he mentioned your reunion." Sandra froze, her breath caught painfully. "How does he know we reunited? It just happened today." Daniel answered slowly. "That is exactly why it is concerning." Keanu straightened with a sudden urgency. Sandra saw his entire energy shift. The calm kindness in his eyes was replaced by a sharp protectiveness she had only glimpsed a few times in her life. "What did the message say?" Keanu demanded softly, his voice deep and controlled. Daniel hesitated for a moment, then spoke carefully. "It said, the moment you step back into her life is the moment everything begins again." Sandra felt her chest tighten. "What begins again?" Daniel shook his head. "We are not sure yet, but he is watching, and he is aware of your proximity." Keanu looked at Sandra with a seriousness that made her heart race. "I should not have come today." Sandra immediately grabbed his hand without thinking. "Keanu, don't say that." He looked at her, surprised by her reaction. Her touch was warm, steady, and filled with fear and determination all at once. He felt a surge of emotion move through him. Daniel cleared his throat gently. "Miss Bullock, I am not here to frighten you. I just came to inform Keanu, but now that you both know, we need to take careful steps." Sandra let go of Keena's hand reluctantly. "What kind of steps?" "Monitoring," Daniel said. "Security adjustments. Communication between both of you so we can understand the pattern." Keanu nodded instinctively. "I will stay close. I want to help." Sandra looked at him, her voice low and shaken. "But if staying close puts us at risk, what are we supposed to do?" Daniel interrupted softly. "That is the complicated part. If he is watching, distance may not change anything now." Keanu rubbed his forehead with a troubled breath. "So being apart again won't protect her?" Daniel shook his head. "No, it might even make things worse because he already saw your reunion." Sandra felt fear settle in her chest like a heavy stone. She had come to the charity event expecting a simple, quiet day. Instead, she was learning truths that made her past and present collide in ways she had never imagined. Keanu looked at her with deep remorse. "I should have told you everything years ago." She shook her head. "It would not have changed what happened. You did what you thought was best." Keanu took a slow breath. "I thought staying away would keep you safe, but maybe staying close is what we should have done." Sandra felt the weight of his words. They carried regret, longing, and a truth he had never spoken aloud until this moment. She wanted to say something sincere, something gentle, but Daniel interrupted again. "There is another part of the message." The tension sharpened instantly. Keanu turned. "What part?" Daniel answered carefully. "He said that he has something belonging to you." Keanu froze. "Belonging to me?" "Yes," Daniel confirmed. "And he said you will only understand when you see it." Sandra's heart pounded. "What does he have?" Daniel looked uneasy. "I do not know, but he implied it is not an object. It is something personal, something meaningful." Keanu felt his stomach tighten. He tried to recall anything from the past that could have been taken or stolen or lost without his knowledge. He thought of letters, scripts, photos, gifts, private memories. He could not think of anything. Sandra watched him anxiously. Keanu, what could it be? He shook his head slowly. I don't know, I truly don't know. Daniel continued. He said he would reveal it soon, and he said the reveal would change how you see everything. The sunlight between the trees dimmed slightly as clouds passed overhead. Sandra felt a chill run through her, as if the world itself recognized the danger that had returned. Keanu stood up suddenly. He looked restless, disturbed, shaken in a way Sandra had never witnessed before. Daniel, he said firmly, I need to know everything, every detail, every update. Daniel nodded. I will brief you, but we need to do it somewhere private. Keanu hesitated, then looked at Sandra. I want you to be part of this too. She blinked in surprise. Are you sure? Yes, he said softly. This involves you as much as me. I will not walk away again. The sincerity in his voice made her heart ache in a new way. She nodded slowly. Daniel stood. There is a safe meeting room near the agency building. We can talk there. Keanu agreed. We will follow you. But before anyone could take a step, Sandra's phone buzzed inside her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting a message from her children or her assistant. When she looked at the screen, her entire body went still. The message was from an unknown number. There were only 5 words. But those 5 words changed everything. She held the phone with trembling fingers. Keanu noticed her reaction. Sandra, what is it? Her voice came out small, shaken, almost broken. The message says, I saw who you hugged. Keanu froze. Daniel immediately stepped closer. Let me see the phone. Sandra slowly handed it to him, her hands trembling violently. Daniel examined the message. His face darkened. He is watching, Daniel said quietly, right now. Sandra felt cold fear rush through her veins. This can't be happening. Keanu stepped closer, his voice deep with protective urgency. Sandra, look at me. She looked up, tears gathering in her eyes. You are not alone, he said firmly. I am not leaving, not this time. But before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. A second message. She opened it with shaking hands. Her eyes widened. Her breath stopped. Keanu saw her expression and felt dread climb up his spine. Sandra, he whispered, what does it say? She swallowed hard and read the message aloud, her voice barely holding together. It says, I am holding what he lost. Keanu's heart dropped. Daniel looked horrified. The air around them felt heavier than before. Sandra whispered with fear, Keanu, what did you lose? And Keanu, staring at the phone in absolute shock, finally realized what the message meant. His voice broke as he whispered the truth. I think he has the letter. Sandra stared at him. What letter? Keanu closed his eyes for a painful moment. When he opened them, he looked at Sandra with a mixture of regret and fear. The letter I wrote to you years ago, he said softly. The one I never sent. Sandra felt her heart stop. Daniel stepped forward immediately. We need to move now. Keanu grabbed Sandra's hand as they turned to leave. But before they could take a single step, her phone buzzed again. She looked at the screen. One new message. She opened it, and her face went white. Keanu grabbed her shoulders. Sandra, tell me. She looked at him through widening eyes. The message says, I will return the letter only when you hear what it says. Keanu swallowed hard. That is not possible. He cannot know what is written inside. But Sandra shook her head slowly, her voice trembling. Keanu, she whispered, he sent a photo. Keanu froze. A photo of what? Sandra turned the phone toward him. Keanu's eyes widened in shock. Because the photo clearly showed the letter. Opened. The handwriting visible. And the words he never wanted anyone else to read now exposed. His private confession. His deepest truth. The thing he had hidden for years. Sandra whispered, trembling violently. Keanu, he knows you loved me. The world stopped. The sight of that letter, opened and exposed inside a stranger's hands, shattered the quiet balance Keanu had guarded for years. He stared at the phone screen as if the world around him had frozen. Sandra watched him with a mix of shock, fear, and a depth of emotion she had kept buried far beneath her calm exterior. She felt her heart beating painfully against her ribs because this was not just a dangerous message. It was a window into a truth Keanu had never shared with her. A truth he had written in ink long ago, when timing had been cruel and circumstances had been unforgiving. Keanu felt the ground shift beneath him. He had written that letter during one of the hardest moments of his life, when he felt the world closing around him and the only steady warmth he knew came from the quiet comfort of Sandra's friendship. He had written it with trembling hands, unsure if he would ever give it to her, unsure if he deserved to say those words aloud. The confession was simple, honest, and filled with more heart than he ever let himself show. And now it was in the hands of someone who wished harm. Sandra lowered the phone slowly, trying to process the weight of the moment. The wind seemed to still around them. Keanu looked at her, his eyes heavy with vulnerability she had rarely seen from him. She swallowed hard as she asked, "Keanu, what exactly did you write?" He felt his throat tighten. "I wrote the truth of how I felt. I wrote it during a time when I did not know what my future looked like. I wrote it when I thought I had already lost too much in my life. I wrote it because you were one of the only people who made me feel safe." Sandra's voice softened, "And you never sent it." Keanu shook his head slowly. "No, I folded it and kept it. I did not think I deserved to complicate your life. And then the threats came and everything changed. I knew I could not bring you into that danger, so I stayed away." A deep ache grew in Sandra's chest. She had always felt something unspoken between them, something quiet but undeniably real. But she never imagined he had written something like that, and she never imagined someone dangerous had it now. Daniel stepped closer, his expression sharp and alert. "We need to move. The fact that he has this letter means he has been closer to you than we thought. We cannot stay out in the open." Keanu nodded quickly. "We need answers now. We cannot ignore this." They moved together through the quiet streets, heading toward Daniel's secured office building. Sandra walked between them, her mind racing with emotions she could not slow down. She replayed every moment she ever shared with Keanu, every laugh, every subtle connection, every silent understanding. Had she missed signs? Had she felt the same and refused to acknowledge it? Or was she only now realizing something she should have seen long ago? Keanu walked with careful awareness, scanning their surroundings while trying to calm his own storm. He felt fear for Sandra. He felt anger toward the man who dared to threaten her, and he felt shame for the truth revealed in such a cruel way. The letter was meant to be private. It was never meant to appear like this. He wondered if she would think differently of him now, or if this confession would create a distance he had never wanted. They reached the building. Daniel led them into a small private room with soundproof walls, a reinforced door, and muted lighting. It felt safe, but the tension inside the room was anything but calm. Daniel closed the door behind them and took out a small tablet, preparing to show Keanu additional information. "I kept monitoring after the messages restarted," Daniel said. "There are patterns in them. I need you both to see them." Keanu sat down slowly. Sandra sat beside him, close enough that he felt the warmth of her presence. She had not said much since reading the message. He could sense she was processing more than just fear. This frightened him in ways he could not articulate. Daniel tapped the screen and showed them a series of messages. They were organized by date, by handwriting comparisons, by location data patterns. As he explained, Sandra leaned forward, studying each detail. "This person has been quiet for years," Daniel said. "Completely silent. Then suddenly he reacts the same day you two see each other again. This is not coincidence. He has been waiting." Sandra looked up. "Waiting for what?" Daniel hesitated. "For Keanu to return." Keanu felt a cold weight drop into his stomach. "This is my fault." Sandra turned to him sharply. "No, you are not responsible for someone else's obsession." Keanu shook his head. "He followed you because of me. He threatened you because of me. He took the letter because of me." Sandra placed a hand gently on his arm. "Keanu, listen to me. This happened years ago. You cannot blame yourself for the choices of someone unstable. You tried to protect me. You did what you thought was right." Keanu looked at her with a mixture of pain and gratitude. "But I hurt you by leaving." She exhaled slowly. "I was hurt. I will not pretend otherwise, but knowing this changes everything. Now I understand you were trying to keep me safe." Daniel cleared his throat, bringing their attention back to the screen. There is more. He sent 2 other messages this morning before he wrote to you. Keanu leaned forward. Show me. Daniel tapped the screen again. The first message appeared. It was addressed to Keanu. You walked away once. You cannot walk away again, not until you face what you left behind. Sandra felt chills run down her spine. He is targeting your regret. Daniel nodded. He is using emotional leverage. Keanu clenched his jaw, and the second message. Daniel opened it. She never knew the truth you hid. She deserves to hear it in your voice. Sandra inhaled sharply. He is pushing you to talk to me. Keanu looked devastated. He is manipulating us. He is forcing this. Daniel shook his head. Not forcing, exposing. He wants chaos. He wants fear. He wants you both unsettled. Sandra whispered, because fear makes people vulnerable. Keanu nodded slowly, and vulnerability makes people predictable. Daniel added, there is something else. He referenced a location in one of the earlier messages. Keanu straightened. What location? Daniel rotated the tablet and pointed to a highlighted phrase. I left something where your memories began. Sandra felt a tremor inside her. She looked at Keanu. Memories began, she repeated softly. Keanu, where did your memories with me begin? Keanu's mind raced through timelines, places, moments. Their first film together. Interviews, rehearsals, small, unlikely conversations, shared jokes. But the memory that stood out the most was strangely simple. He looked at Sandra, the bus. She froze, the bus scene on set. He nodded. Yes, that was where we first bonded. That was where we first laughed at the same thing. That was where something shifted. Daniel stood. Then that may be the place. That may be where he left whatever he is referring to. Sandra's heart quickened, but going there might be dangerous. Daniel agreed, which is why neither of you are going alone. Keanu looked at Sandra with a seriousness that vibrated in the air. I want to go. I need to know what he left. Sandra swallowed. Keanu, if you go, I go. Keanu shook his head immediately. No, it might not be safe for you. She stared at him with a mixture of firmness and emotion. You said you would not leave again, then don't leave me out of this. Keanu's breath caught. Sandra's determination, her courage, her loyalty, and the old familiar strength in her eyes reminded him why she had always mattered so deeply. Daniel looked between them. I will arrange protection. If you are going, we are going together. He stepped out to make calls, leaving Keanu and Sandra alone in the room for the first time since the truth spilled out. Silence filled the space, heavy but meaningful. Sandra finally broke it, her voice soft but steady. Keanu, the letter, you loved me back then. Keanu looked down, then slowly raised his eyes. The vulnerability in them made her chest ache. I did. You were a light in a time when everything felt dark. I admired you. I cared about you. I felt something I did not have the courage to acknowledge out loud. Sandra breathed slowly. You never gave me that letter. He nodded. I did not want to complicate your life, and then everything happened, and then it felt too late. Sandra felt her heart swell with a mixture of sadness and unexpected warmth. I wish I had known. Keanu hesitated. Would it have changed anything? Sandra looked at him with honesty she had never allowed herself before. I don't know, maybe, maybe not, but the truth would have mattered, and hearing it now matters more than you think. Keanu's eyes softened. I am sorry for all the years you spent thinking I didn't care. She stepped closer. I never thought you did not care, I just thought you chose silence. Keanu inhaled deeply. I chose fear. Their eyes held an unspoken connection that felt almost painful in its depth. The door opened, Daniel returned. Everything is arranged, we leave now. They stood, preparing to walk into a past that had been waiting for them. As they stepped outside, Sandra's phone buzzed again. She froze. Keanu immediately stepped closer. What is it? Sandra looked at the screen slowly. Her face drained of color. Daniel grabbed the phone and read the message aloud. If you want the truth, follow the sound of what you forgot. Keanu frowned. The sound, what sound? Daniel read further. And bring her, she needs to hear what you wrote. Keanu's stomach tightened. He wants Sandra there. Sandra whispered, he is pulling us toward something. Daniel said, "We do not follow his timeline. We follow ours. Let us move." They walked to the cars waiting outside. Two security vehicles, tinted windows, engines running. Sandra and Keanu entered the back seat of the first one while Daniel took the second car behind them. The drive toward the old filming location felt surreal. Sandra looked out the window, remembering the laughter, the long days on set, the unexpected comfort she found in Keanu during that time. She remembered how gentle he always was, how respectful, how quietly protective even when he never said anything about it. She wondered how much pain he had been carrying beneath his softness. Keanu watched the road ahead, his hands clasped together, his thoughts heavy with memories and fear. He wondered if this moment would hurt Sandra, if the confession inside the letter would break the delicate balance of their relationship. He wished he could rewrite the past. He wished he could take the letter back from the hands of the stranger. He wished the timing of everything had been kinder. As they approached the abandoned studio lot where the bus prop still remained, Sandra felt the air shift. It was quiet, too quiet. The area was fenced off, unused for years, forgotten like an old photograph hidden in a drawer. But today felt different. Today it felt like a place holding answers. The cars stopped at the gate. Daniel stepped out first with two officers, checking the surroundings. After a few moments, he signaled that it was safe to enter. Keanu and Sandra stepped out together. The air was thick with memory. The rusted old bus stood in the center of the lot, sun-faded and weathered. Time had touched it, but the shape was unmistakable. Sandra felt her breath catch. Keanu felt something tighten in his chest. They walked slowly toward the bus. The closer they came, the more the moment felt unreal, as if time itself had folded, bringing their past and present together. Daniel walked ahead to inspect the interior. After a moment, he called out, "There is something here." Keanu and Sandra exchanged a look and stepped inside. The bus smelled of dust and old metal. Sunlight streamed through cracked windows. Daniel pointed toward the last row of seats. A small box sat there. Keanu stepped forward carefully. Daniel scanned it for any danger. After ensuring it was safe, he nodded. Keanu reached out with trembling fingers and opened the lid. Inside was a single object. Sandra stepped closer, her breath unsteady. Keanu picked it up slowly, shocked by what he saw. It was a cassette tape, labeled in neat handwriting. "Play me," Sandra whispered, the sound he mentioned. Keanu looked at Daniel. "We need a player." Daniel immediately called a team member to bring a portable cassette player. Within minutes, the device arrived. Keanu placed the tape gently inside. The moment the play button clicked, a soft static filled the bus. Sandra grabbed Keanu's hand without realizing it. Then a voice began to speak through the speaker. But it was not the voice of the stalker. It was Keanu's voice. Sandra's eyes widened with shock. Keanu felt every muscle in his body freeze. The recording was of him reading the letter aloud. The letter he never sent. The confession he never spoke. And as his recorded voice filled the silent bus, speaking words he had once whispered only to paper, Sandra felt tears gather in her eyes. But right before the recording reached the part of the confession, the tape stopped suddenly. Silence filled the bus. A new voice replaced the static. A voice neither of them recognized. "If you want the rest," the stranger said, "meet me where the truth broke him." Sandra felt her heart stop. Keanu whispered, "No." Daniel asked, "What does he mean?" Sandra looked at Keanu, her voice trembling. "Keanu," she whispered, "where did the truth break you?" Keanu closed his eyes. Pain flashed across his face. And then he answered with a voice full of heartbreak he never shared. "The hospital." Sandra felt her world shatter. The word hospital did not simply fill the air. It cracked it open. Sandra stared at Keanu, feeling a wave of emotion crash through her chest. Daniel stepped closer with sharp alertness, sensing that whatever came next was not just about danger. It was about something personal, something heavy, something Keanu had kept buried for far too long. The silence in the old bus became suffocating. Sunlight from the cracked windows flickered across Keanu's face as he stood still, unable to move, unable to look away from the painful truth returning to him after years of avoidance. Sandra touched his arm gently. "Keanu, what happened at the hospital?" He swallowed hard, his throat tight. That is where everything changed for me. That is where I stopped believing I deserved anything good. That is where I decided I had no right to tell you how I felt." Sandra's heart twisted painfully. She had known pieces of his story, the shadows he carried, the wounds he rarely spoke about. But she also knew there were parts of his past he had never shared with anyone. She realized this might be one of them. Daniel spoke with caution. "We need to understand why he chose that location. What does the hospital represent?" Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself. When he opened them, his voice was soft but filled with raw honesty. "It was where I last felt completely broken. It was right after I wrote the letter." Sandra stepped closer. "You were in the hospital when you wrote it." He nodded slowly. "Yes, I wrote it on a night I thought I might not make it through. I was dealing with pain that felt impossible. I wrote it because I needed to say those words somewhere, even if I never said them out loud." Sandra's eyes filled with tears, and the stalker found it. Keanu looked down. "Yes, somehow, somewhere along the path he took it, I never knew." Daniel spoke firmly. "If the hospital is the next location, then he is not only watching, he is recreating your emotional timeline. He is following every painful moment of your past." Sandra felt the weight of those words sink deep inside her. This was no longer simply a threat. This was someone who knew more than they should, someone who understood Keanu's vulnerabilities intimately, someone who wanted to pull both of them into a psychological maze designed to stir fear and chaos. Keanu looked at Daniel. "We will go there." Daniel nodded, with full security. Sandra turned to Keanu. "Are you sure you can handle going back?" He nodded slowly. "I do not want to, but I do not want him to control the story either." Sandra placed her hand on his. "You are not alone this time." She meant it, Keanu felt it, and for a brief moment the fear inside him loosened its grip. They left the old bus in silence. The atmosphere felt heavier now, the sunlight dimmer as clouds slowly drifted across the sky. They walked back to the cars where security teams stood waiting. Daniel signaled the lead officer and whispered instructions. Within minutes, the convoy moved toward the hospital. Through the tinted window, Sandra watched the city pass by, her thoughts racing. She had always known Keanu carried pain, but hearing it in this context broke her heart in a way she never expected. She wanted to reach out, to comfort him, to let him know he no longer had to carry these shadows alone. Keanu stared ahead, his hands resting in his lap, his fingers slightly trembling. He felt Sandra's gaze on him but did not look up. He was afraid of what she would see in his eyes. Fear, guilt, regret, and something deeper he had never allowed himself to acknowledge because the world around him had always demanded strength. After a long moment, Sandra spoke gently. "Keanu, what exactly happened at that hospital? I need to understand." Keanu hesitated, then exhaled softly. "It was years ago, after a personal loss. I was overwhelmed, physically and emotionally. I tried to keep working, I tried to stay strong, but my body gave out. I collapsed on set and woke up in the hospital. The doctors said stress had pushed me past my limits. I felt like I was failing everyone, especially the people I cared about." Sandra listened with tears gathering in her eyes. "You were carrying too much alone." He nodded. "I did not know how to ask for help. I thought I had to be strong for everyone else." She whispered, "You never had to be strong for me." Keanu looked at her for the first time since they left the bus. The sadness in his eyes made her heart ache. "I know that now, but back then I did not think I deserved support. I did not think I deserved you." Sandra felt a sharp pain inside her. "You deserved kindness, love, and support more than anyone. You always did." Their eyes held each other for a long time, filled with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. The convoy slowed as they approached the hospital. It was an older building, with pale walls and tall windows that reflected the dimming sky. Sandra felt a sudden heaviness in her chest as they stepped out. Keanu paused at the entrance, staring at the doors he had not walked through in years. Sandra took his hand gently. "I am here." Keanu looked at her with gratitude so deep it nearly broke him. Daniel approached with 2 security officers. "We will sweep the inside first. Wait here." They nodded. Sandra and Keanu stood near the entrance, feeling the tension grow as minutes passed. The officers returned and gave the all clear. Daniel motioned them forward. They entered the lobby. It smelled faintly of disinfectant and old linoleum. The fluorescent lights cast a pale glow across the floor. Keanu's steps slowed as he looked around. Memories flooded back. He remembered the room where he had lain alone. He remembered the exhaustion that weighed on his chest. He remembered writing the letter at 2 in the morning while the world slept. Sandra watched him closely. She reached for his hand again. He squeezed it lightly, grounding himself. Daniel led them toward the old wing of the hospital, now partially unused. They walked through a long corridor illuminated by flickering lights. The atmosphere grew colder. Sandra felt goosebumps rise along her arms. Keanu paused at one door. This was the room. Daniel motioned the officers to check it. After a moment, they signaled it was safe. Keanu walked inside slowly. Sandra followed him, her heart pounding. The room was simple, almost empty. An old bed stood against the wall. A table sat near the window. The sunlight filtering through the dusty glass cast a soft glow across the floor. Keanu stood in the center, overwhelmed by memories. Sandra stepped beside him and whispered, "This place hurt you." Keanu nodded. "Yes, but it also showed me something important. It showed me how much I needed connection, how much I needed people like you, and that terrified me." Sandra looked at him gently. "Because you were afraid to lose someone again." Keanu closed his eyes briefly. "Yes." Daniel approached the small table near the window. "There is something here." Keanu and Sandra turned. Daniel held a small envelope in his gloved hand. Keanu's heart dropped. "Is that from him?" Daniel nodded. "Same handwriting." Sandra felt a chill rush through her. "Open it." Daniel carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a single piece of paper. It had one sentence. Daniel read it aloud. "Hear what he hid from you, but only in the place he chose to hide." Keanu frowned sharply. "What place did I choose to hide?" Sandra looked at him. "Keanu, think. Where did you hide emotionally? Where did you pull away from everyone?" Keanu thought for a long moment. His breath grew uneven. He whispered, "The beach." Sandra looked confused. "What beach?" Keanu swallowed hard. "There is a small quiet beach outside the city. I used to go there when I needed to escape, when I could not handle my thoughts, when I needed silence. I never told anyone about it." Daniel's eyes widened. "If he knows about that place, he knows far more about you than we realized." Keanu felt panic rising. "Then he has been watching me for longer than we thought." Sandra felt the fear tightening around them. "He wants us to go there." Daniel nodded, "And he wants you to hear something." Keanu asked, "What could he possibly want me to hear?" Daniel exhaled slowly. "Whatever he recorded next, he is leading us through the pieces of your past." Sandra whispered, "Because he wants to break you down." Keanu clenched his jaw. "I will not let him hurt you." She placed her hand on his cheek gently. "Keanu, I am here by choice. You are not protecting me by pushing me away again." His eyes softened with emotion he could no longer hide. Daniel folded the paper. "We need to go to the beach, but we must be prepared. This could be a trap." Keanu nodded. "We will face it together." As they exited the hospital, the sky had darkened. Clouds gathered overhead, making the air feel heavy and electric. Sandra stayed close to Keanu, sensing the emotional toll this journey was taking on him. He moved with quiet determination, but she could see the shadows in his eyes. The convoy drove toward the coast. The road grew narrower, quieter, surrounded by tall grass and distant waves. The sky turned a deeper shade of gray. Sandra felt the tension thickening. Keanu watched the horizon. The beach had always been his escape, his silent refuge. He had never imagined returning with Sandra beside him. He never imagined returning with danger pulling them forward like invisible strings. They arrived near the cliffside. The beach stretched below them, quiet, untouched, peaceful in its loneliness. Daniel signaled the officers. They spread out, searching the area. After several tense minutes, one officer called out. "Over here." Keanu and Sandra hurried toward the sound. A small wooden box lay on the sand, partially buried. Keanu felt his chest tighten. Daniel carefully checked it, then nodded. Keanu lifted the lid. Inside was a small recorder. And a note. Sandra picked up the note and read aloud. "You heard the beginning, now hear the ending." Keanu frowned. "The ending of what?" Daniel said, "The letter." Keanu's breath caught. The letter had more. Sandra whispered, "Keanu, what did you write that this man thinks will change everything?" Keanu closed his eyes. Something I never wanted you to hear unless it came from me. Sandra touched his arm gently. Whatever it is, we will face it together. Keanu nodded, although fear twisted inside him. Daniel pressed the recorder's button. A soft static filled the air. Keanu felt his stomach drop. Then his own voice began to play. A voice from years ago. Fragile, shaky, full of emotion. Sandra, I do not know if I will ever give you this. I do not know if these words will ever reach you. But I need them to exist somewhere because you are the only person who made me feel alive again after everything I lost. Sandra felt her heart shatter. The recording continued. You make the world feel gentle in a way I forgot was possible. You remind me of kindness when I fear I have none left. You make me want to be better, not for the world, for you. Tears rolled down Sandra's cheeks. Keanu's hands shook violently. His recorded voice grew even softer. If I ever walk away from you, I want you to know it was never because you were not enough. It was because I was afraid of hurting you with the broken pieces of myself. I loved you, Sandra. I loved you in silence because I did not know how to love out loud. Sandra covered her mouth with trembling fingers. Keanu looked like the world was collapsing around him. But the recording was not over. The tone shifted suddenly. A new voice joined the recording. The stalker's voice. Slow, eerie, controlled. Now that she knows, the real story begins. The recorder clicked off. Silence. Thick, heavy, unsettling. Sandra turned to Keanu, tears streaming. You loved me. Keanu's voice broke. I did. She swallowed hard, trembling. Keanu, why did you hide this from me? He opened his mouth, unable to speak. But before he could answer, a shadow moved on the cliff above them. Daniel saw it first. Get down, he shouted. Keanu grabbed Sandra and pulled her close as officers rushed forward. But the shadow stepped into the light, revealing a face neither of them expected. Sandra gasped. Keanu froze completely. Daniel whispered with disbelief. That is not him. Sandra stared in shock. Because the person standing on the cliff was someone Sandra once knew. Someone who should not have been part of this story. Someone whose return changed everything. Sandra's breath froze in her chest the moment she recognized the silhouette standing on the cliff. The wind blew across the beach with a sharp coldness as the figure stepped forward, revealing their face slowly through the fading daylight. Keanu held onto Sandra instinctively, as if uncertain whether the danger ahead was physical, emotional, or both. Daniel signaled the officers to stay alert, their hands resting on their weapons, eyes scanning the cliff with increasing tension. The person who appeared was not the stalker they had imagined. It was someone Sandra once trusted, someone she had shared a small but meaningful part of her history with during a stressful year in her life. It was her former public relations manager, Michael Hartwell, a man who vanished from her professional world years ago after a sudden and unexplained breakdown. A man who once cared deeply about protecting her image, but slowly became overly invested in her personal life until she had to sever ties for her own safety and peace of mind. Michael stood on the cliff with a look that blended calm and madness. He stared down at Sandra and Keanu like an observer who believed he controlled the entire narrative. He lifted a hand slowly, almost as if greeting them, but there was no warmth in the gesture. Sandra felt her pulse racing. Michael, she whispered under her breath, disbelief coated her voice. Keanu turned to her immediately. You know him. She nodded slowly, unable to look away. Yes, I worked with him years ago. Daniel's eyes sharpened instantly. Your former manager, the one who disappeared. Yes, she said quietly. He vanished without warning. I thought he left the industry. Keanu stepped protectively in front of her. He is the one behind all of this. Daniel's voice grew cautious. We cannot confirm that yet, but he is involved. Michael spoke finally, his voice carrying too clearly across the wind. I see the two of you finally followed my path. It took you long enough. Keanu's entire body tensed. What do you want? Michael gave a small, eerie smile. I want you to listen. Daniel moved slightly forward. You need to come down and surrender now. Michael ignored him. His eyes remained fixed on Sandra. I have waited for this moment for years. I watched you trust people who never deserved you. I watched you suffer silently, and I watched him walk away from you when you needed him. Sandra felt a chill travel down her spine. Michael, what are you doing? This is not you. He tilted his head. You never really knew me, Sandra. Keanu took a step forward, his voice low and steady. Leave her out of this. Michael's eyes snapped to him with sudden intensity. You do not get to speak for her. You walked away. You chose silence. You chose fear. You left her to face the world alone while you ran from your own pain. Sandra looked at Michael with trembling confusion. Why are you doing this? Why now? Michael's expression shifted, a flicker of something almost fragile beneath the madness. Because you deserve honesty, because you deserve protection, because you deserve someone who does not abandon you when life becomes hard. Keanu clenched his fists, his voice trembling with restrained anger. I never abandoned her. I stepped away because she was in danger. Michael scoffed. Danger you created, danger you attracted. Daniel's voice grew firm. Michael, come down now, let us talk civilly. Michael lifted the recorder in his hand, the same one they just listened to. Civility is gone. Truth is all that matters now. Sandra's eyes widened. You added your voice to the recording. Michael nodded slowly. I needed you to hear the truth he hid, the truth he never wanted you to know, the truth he buried for years while pretending to be your friend. Keanu stepped forward again. You stole that letter. Michael's smile deepened. I found what you left behind. You left it carelessly. You left it where it mattered most. You left it in a moment of weakness, and weakness always reveals the truth. Daniel signaled the officers subtly. They began spreading out along the beach, trying to find a way up the cliff without drawing attention. Michael noticed instantly. If anyone moves closer, I walk away from this cliff, and then you will never find me again. The officers halted immediately. Sandra stepped forward slightly, her voice trembling but steady. Michael, what do you want from me? Michael's expression softened strangely. I want you to understand what he took from you. Sandra blinked through the wind. He did not take anything from me. Yes, Michael insisted with growing intensity. He took years of your life, he took your trust, he stole your peace. You loved him even when you did not want to admit it, and he disappeared. He left you wondering why you were not enough. Keanu felt something inside him crack. Stop. But Michael continued. You told me things, Sandra, things you do not even remember saying. You told me about nights when you felt alone. You told me how much his absence hurt you. I listened when he did not. I stayed when he left. Sandra's heart raced. Michael, those conversations were during a difficult time in my life. You were supposed to help me, not twist my words. Michael's face flickered with wounded rage. I helped you more than he ever did. Keanu stepped forward, voice heavy with emotion. She did not need a savior. She needed space to breathe. She needed time to heal. You twisted that into something dangerous. Michael pointed at him sharply. You were the danger you always were. Daniel raised his voice. Michael, step down. You are unstable. This ends today. Michael's expression shifted to something cold. No, this ends when she knows everything. Sandra felt fear rise in her chest. What does that mean? Michael's eyes glowed with something dark. I have another recording. Keanu's heart dropped. You recorded something else. Michael nodded. Yes, I recorded something you never wanted exposed. Daniel clenched his jaw. Where is it? Michael lifted a small flash drive. Right here, the final message, the truth. Sandra looked at him with confusion and dread. What truth? Michael's voice softened in a broken way. The moment he chose fear over you, the moment he decided you were better off without him, the moment he made the choice that hurt you the most. Keanu's eyes darkened. Michael, whatever you think you understand, you do not know my reasons. Michael laughed quietly. I know everything. I followed you both for years. I saw every moment, every hint, every silence. Sandra felt her stomach twist. You followed us. Michael nodded proudly. I studied the pattern. I saw the signs long before either of you did. I knew he loved you. I knew you felt something too. I knew the world wanted you together, but he ruined it. Keanu squeezed his eyes shut briefly. I did not ruin anything. Michael pointed the flash drive toward him. This proves otherwise. Daniel moved slowly, trying to buy time. what is on that drive? Michael turned his attention to Sandra. It is a recording of the day he made his final decision, the moment he spoke the words that sealed your fate. Keanu's breath hitched. Michael, stop, this is not your story to tell. Michael's voice rose, but you never told it, so I will. Sandra looked at Keanu with wide, trembling eyes. Keanu, what is on that drive? Keanu swallowed hard. I do not know. He must have recorded something I said without my knowledge. Michael smiled. I did. You said something you never intended her to hear, something you spoke when you thought you were alone, something that explains everything. Sandra held her breath. Michael, give me the drive. She moved forward slowly. Michael stepped closer to the edge. Keanu shouted, Sandra, stay back. But Sandra kept walking, her voice softened. Michael, look at me. I am not angry. I am not here to fight. I just want peace. Hand it to me. You do not have to do this. Michael's eyes wavered. A flicker of the man she once knew appeared inside the madness, like a fragile memory fighting to breathe. I wanted to protect you, he whispered. I wanted to keep you safe. Sandra nodded gently. I know, and I appreciate that, but this is not the way. Michael looked at her with trembling conflict. But then he saw Keanu step closer behind her. And his face hardened instantly. Stop, he shouted. Keanu froze. Michael's voice cracked. If he comes any closer, I will destroy this drive. Daniel whispered urgently, if he destroys it, we lose the evidence. We lose the leverage. Keanu stepped back slowly, hands raised. Sandra stood still, breathing softly. Michael, look at me, not at him, look at me. He finally met her gaze again. She took one more small step forward. But then, her phone buzzed. She froze. Michael looked startled. What is that? Sandra slowly lifted the phone to see the message. Her eyes widened. A new message from the stalker number. She opened it. Keanu watched her face pale. Sandra, he whispered, read it. Her voice trembled. It says, that man on the cliff is not the one behind all of this. Daniel's eyes widened. Keanu felt his blood run cold. Michael looked confused. What are you talking about? Sandra read the next line. It says he is just another piece. Michael stepped back. No, I am the one who. Sandra continued reading, her voice shaking. And the real truth is right behind you. Everyone snapped their attention upward. But not at Michael. Up the cliffside. Behind him, a second shadow emerged. Taller, colder, unrecognizable. Michael turned slowly, confusion shifting into terror. Sandra gasped. Keanu felt his entire body seize with dread. Daniel shouted, everyone down. The shadow stepped into the light, revealing the real stalker. And what he held in his hand was something that made Sandra scream. The shape that stepped forward from behind Michael was not just another person. It was a presence heavy with intent, darkness, and a strange calm that chilled every breath on the beach. Sandra grabbed Keanu's arm instinctively, and Keanu wrapped his arm around her protectively as his eyes locked on the stranger. Daniel shouted orders to the officers as they rushed to reposition, their boots sinking into the sand as they prepared for whatever came next. The wind howled across the cliffside. The waves crashed louder, as if nature itself was warning them. The stalker moved with eerie composure, a contrast to the trembling, heartbroken confusion on Michael's face. This new figure was the orchestrator, the watcher, the one who had pulled every string from the shadows while letting Michael believe he had control. The stranger stepped closer until the light revealed his face fully. He was middle-aged, tall, with sharp eyes that seemed to analyze every expression on every face below. His features were unfamiliar to Sandra and Keanu, but there was something unsettling about his presence, like he had been watching them long before this moment. He held something in his hand, something that made Sandra scream because she recognized it instantly. It was the original letter. The one Keanu had written in the hospital. The one Keanu never sent. The one that revealed the deepest truth he had ever buried. The stalker lifted the letter between two fingers as if it were a fragile artifact he owned. His voice carried across the wind, calm but chilling. You want answers, he said, So here they are. Michael turned toward him, betrayal breaking across his face. You took everything from me. You told me I was doing the right thing. The stalker did not look at him. He did not acknowledge the emotion in Michael's voice. Instead, he continued walking along the cliff edge like a patient narrator delivering the final chapter of a story he had designed. Daniel raised his arm. Drop the letter and surrender now. The stalker ignored him. This is not about surrender, this is about truth. Keanu stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with rage he rarely allowed himself to show. You had no right to take that letter. You had no right to twist our lives into your obsession. The stalker looked at Keanu finally, his eyes empty and cold. You gave me the right when you left it behind. Keanu's jaw tightened. I did not leave it for you. I did not leave it for anyone. The stalker shrugged lightly. Abandoned things choose their owners. Sandra shook her head, her voice sharp with fear and anger. You are sick. You need help. He smiled faintly. Help is for people who lose control. I never lost control. I have planned every step. Daniel motioned the officers to circle discreetly. The stalker glanced briefly, a flash of annoyance crossing his face. No one moves, he said, or I throw the letter into the ocean. You will never know the final truth written inside. Keanu froze. Sandra touched his hand. She felt his trembling even though he stood tall. Michael stepped backward, fear taking over him. You used me. You told me she needed protection. You told me he was the enemy. The stalker finally turned to him with a cold stare. You were useful. You were predictable. Michael's voice cracked. I trusted you. That was your mistake, the stalker replied. Sandra stepped forward bravely, her voice trembling but strong. Stop hurting him. He made mistakes, but he is not your puppet. None of us are. The stalker looked almost amused. You think this is about him? You think any of this is about him, but the truth is simple. It was always about you. Sandra felt chills run through her. Why? His eyes sharpened. Because you were the only thing he ever said that gave him hope. He pointed at Keanu. Keanu's breath stopped. What are you talking about? The stalker lifted the letter slightly. I listened to your recordings in the hospital. I was a volunteer worker. I helped clean rooms. I was there when you broke down. I was there when you whispered into the recorder. I was there when you wrote this letter. Keanu stared at him in shock. You were in the room. He nodded proudly. Not seen, not noticed. You were the most interesting person I had ever watched. You were fragile, you were grieving, and you spoke about her with more love than you realized. Keanu felt sick. You violated my privacy. You stole my pain. The stalker tilted his head. I studied it. I learned who you were, and I became what you needed. Sandra stepped between them. You became what he feared. The stalker's expression tightened, and for the first time, emotion flickered across his face. I protected you when he did not. I watched you when he abandoned you. Keanu grabbed Sandra's arm. Do not listen to him. But the stalker continued. You spent years alone, years misunderstood, years betrayed by people who said they cared, but I cared the most. Sandra's voice grew sharper. You watch me like an object. That is not care, that is sickness. His eyes narrowed. You do not understand. He stopped you from becoming who you were meant to be. Daniel interrupted firmly. Stop talking, drop the letter. But the stalker held up his other hand, revealing something small and metallic. A detonator. Everyone froze instantly. Officers raised their weapons. Daniel shouted, Everyone stand down, do not provoke him. The stalker smiled. Now you understand, I was always in control. Keanu stepped forward, hands raised. Whatever you planned, you do not want to do this. The stalker studied Keanu with unsettling intensity. You think you deserve forgiveness. You think you deserve redemption. You think she should forgive you for leaving, but you never earned that. Keanu's voice shook. This is not about me. This is about your obsession. The stalker shook his head. This is about the truth you never said, the truth inside this letter. Sandra's voice broke. What truth? He lifted the letter slightly, the wind tugging at the paper. He spoke slowly, clearly. The last line of this letter changes everything you believed. Keanu's heart pounded. Do not say it. The stalker ignored him. The last line said you would leave her again if she ever knew the depth of your feelings. Sandra froze. Her breath stopped. Keanu's entire soul seemed to collapse inward. "I did not say that," he whispered. "I never wrote those words." The stalker smirked. "Yes, you did. You said you were too broken to love her properly. You said she deserved better. You said she needed someone whole, not someone like you." Keanu felt tears burn his eyes. "I said I was afraid, not that I would leave her again." Sandra looked at him, tears falling silently. "Keanu, is any of that true?" Keanu stepped closer, shaking his head desperately. "No, not like he is saying it. I was afraid. I feared hurting you. I feared losing you, but I never would have walked away if I thought I could be good for you." Sandra's voice trembled. "Then why did you leave?" Keanu looked into her eyes, his own wounded. "Because I loved you too much to risk your safety." The stalker laughed softly. "How romantic, how pathetic." Daniel shouted, "Drop the detonator now." The stalker stepped closer to the cliff. The officers tensed, ready to act. "The truth," he said, "is simple." He lifted the letter again. "You two were meant to break each other, not save each other." Sandra whispered, "That is not true." The stalker stepped dangerously close to the edge. "The story ends when I say it ends." Michael suddenly lunged toward him, screaming, "Stop." The stalker stumbled. The detonator slipped from his hand. Chaos exploded. Officers charged upward. Daniel sprinted across the sand. Keanu grabbed Sandra and pulled her behind a rock. The detonator hit the ground. A sharp click echoed. But nothing exploded. No blast. No fire. No destruction. Sandra opened her eyes slowly, confused. It did not go off. Daniel held the device up after retrieving it safely. It was never active. It was a fake. The stalker screamed in rage. "No, this is not how it was supposed to go." Officers tackled him as he thrashed wildly. He screamed Sandra's name. He screamed Keanu's name. He tried to break free, but they restrained him firmly. Michael collapsed to his knees, crying into his hands. Officers moved him away as well, keeping him distant from the stalker. Within minutes, both men were taken into custody. The beach finally fell silent except for the crashing waves. Sandra and Keanu stood together, breathing heavily, trying to process the storm that had just passed. Daniel approached, holding the letter in a sealed evidence bag. "It is safe," he said, "untouched." Sandra looked at Keanu gently. "We should read it together." Keanu nodded, his heart heavy. Daniel handed it to them and stepped away, giving them privacy. They sat on a rock facing the ocean. The sky softened into evening light. Keanu opened the letter slowly with trembling hands. Sandra watched him with quiet patience. Keanu held the letter between them and began to read softly. It was raw. It was honest. It was the truth he never had the courage to share. Every line spoke of fear, loss, healing, gratitude, admiration, and a depth of love he had never expressed aloud. The final line made Sandra's breath catch. "If I ever walk away from you, it will only be because I do not know how to protect the goodness in you from the brokenness in me. But if life ever brings us back together, I hope I am strong enough to stay." Sandra felt tears fall freely. Keanu's voice cracked. That was the truth, not what he twisted it into. She took his hand gently. "I believe you." He looked up, eyes filled with emotion. "Sandra, I never stopped caring about you." She squeezed his hand. "I never stopped caring either." The waves rolled gently across the shore. The sky glowed in soft gold. The chaos had passed. The truth was finally free. Keanu whispered, "I do not want to walk away again." Sandra leaned into him, her voice warm and deep. "Then do not." He closed his eyes, pulling her closer. The wind softened. Their hands intertwined. And for the first time in years, there was peace. Not the quiet peace of avoidance. Not the lonely peace of distance. But the peace of two hearts returning to the place they had always belonged. Together, the reunion Hollywood never expected. Finally real. Finally honest. Finally whole.